Hey YouTube, Alex here, and I'm walking in Bangkok. The thought occurred to me because I'm winding my time down here in Thailand, headed to Vietnam in a few days. Why does Thailand appeal to so many unhappy, specifically Western men, but I think there are also some Western women here too. And I've got some reasons as to why I think that is the case. Let's go ahead and dive into it. Number one is that Thai people are cheerful. Now, this often gets conflated with Thai people are always happy. I don't think that's the case. Thai people experience a full range of emotions like people of any other nationality or background. I think that Thai people tend toward being cheerful. They tend toward being kind of smiling and pleasant and living in the moment. This is very different than in the Western democracies where people are always, sawasdee krap, sawasdee krap, sawasdee krap. Different than in the Western democracies where we are always thinking about the future. How am I going to make enough money to pay my bills? How am I going to make rent this month? I don't think that that's all good or all bad, but I think it's a strong difference in terms of happiness. Now, some would say if you don't plan for the future, you'll find yourself to be quite unhappy. Part of the reason that Thai people can have that live and let live, that mai pan rai, that sabai mentality is that they do have their families to fall back on. I know plenty of people in the Western democracies that cannot trust their families, cannot rely on their families, myself included, and so they have to operate on the premise I am the only person that I can rely on or trust. Very different than in Thailand, which is a generally higher trust society. But it's certainly much higher trust than the Western democracy that I am coming from, the United States. So that was reason number one. Why do so many unhappy Western people feel happier in Thailand? I think it's just being in a culture where people are enjoying the present, and they're not regretting the past, they're not worried about the future. Number two, this is one, we've harped on this so much, I'm gonna try to be light. Of course, the cost of living. You go from a country where the average one-bedroom apartment is $1,500, $2,000 a month. You come to a country like Thailand where you can find fine apartments throughout the country for a few $100s per month, and all of a sudden you have much more disposable income. For what it's worth, I don't find other things to be that much cheaper than the West. When it's the largest expense, rent, and that comes down a lot, people do feel happier. Like, man, you know, when I'm paying $1,500, $2,000 a month for rent, that $10 meal seems a lot more expensive than when I'm paying $300 or $400 a month for rent. Couple that with the high cost of emergencies in the Western democracies. If you have an emergency, you're talking about hundreds of dollars, maybe $1,000 plus, and it makes for a really edgy society. It's much less often the case that I'm going to run into an extremely expensive emergency. Do they happen? Sure. I would say most of those issues are going to be one of two situations. One, it's going to involve a motorbike accident. Two, it could involve an older expat that's running into some kind of unexpected health issue. But you're not going to have this, oh, my car has X, Y, and Z problem. I don't own a car here in Thailand, so there's not going to be any special car emergency I have to pay for. Number three is the weather. I think this especially affects minorities in the West because a lot of us ethnic minorities are coming from places with a lot of sun. We're coming from places with typically a lot sunnier weather. We're used to, genetically speaking, having lots of sun. I think we've evolved to have lots of sun, and for most of the Western democracies, let's set aside Australia, then half the year is cold, rainy, overcast, generally unpleasant, and people are feeling the effects of seasonal affective disorder. And you see this where people's mental health definitely seems to be negatively impacted, not just the ethnic minorities, but people in general with that awful, long, cold, rainy winter. I know some people will glamorize it. If it's so awesome, then why do so many people from the Western democracies become snowbirds when they can afford to do so, where they go down to, in the case of Americans, Arizona or Texas or Florida. For the case of Europeans, they're going to places like Spain, Portugal, Greece, rather than just sticking it out if they have the money. Point number 4 is the aggressive morality component in the Western democracies. In the West, it's not sufficient for you to believe a certain way. You have to also push that belief on others. You have to go around telling people, hey, this is how I believe. I can't have a conversation in a Western democracy without the person pretty quickly on telling me, oh, this is the group that I identify with, and I'm gonna make sure to virtue signal to check out, do you feel the same way? Do you believe the same way? If you don't, the conversation's gonna degrade into, at best, disinterest, or they're not one of my people. At worst, you see it degrade into confrontations and sometimes involving the law. I don't see that here in Thailand. People are not so married to their opinions that they have to go around pushing them on other people. Does that mean that Thai people are pushovers? Not at all. That hasn't been my experience. They are cheerful, they are non-confrontational, but there's not this aggressive morality where they need to go around shoving their opinions at you, and you can't have a conversation without them turning it into something political. With some people in the West, I've just given up talking about certain topics because they can't have a civilized discussion about them. They have to weaponize it into a preaching moment. And I think some of this comes from Christianity. No offense to Christians out there, but some people interpret Christianity in that they have to push their views on the world, even if they're not Christian. Even if you ask these people, are you Christian, whether their ancestors were or not, they still have that genetic component. I've got to crusade. I've got to shove my beliefs down the throats of other people. A lot of Western people are shocked when they come here. They've gotten away from those people, and the people here generally mind their own business and act with respect and courtesy to others. Fifth and final point is that you don't feel like here in Thailand that you're constantly having to do things a new way. Something that shocked me coming back after several years is that the BTS system runs the same, the MRT system runs the same, all of the systems run the same, the city hasn't changed dramatically. And compare this to the US, where I hardly recognize my hometown anymore. Many of the cities that I've spent a lot of time in the US are so dynamic that every 5 or 10 years they feel like totally different cities. The cultures change. In many cases, the artists or the creative class has been priced out. Crime has gone back up. And it's really refreshing for Western people to come to a place like Thailand where things don't change as much. I've gone back to various businesses since I last came here. The same people are often working there. They're selling the same products. Their rent hasn't gone up astronomically, forcing them out of business. They're often remembering me, and it's just such a shock because I can go back to plenty of neighborhoods in my hometown and not recognize anybody. When you're so used to things changing so much and changing so rapidly, and you come to a place that doesn't change as quickly, doesn't change as dramatically. And I think a lot of Western people, as they get older, they're going to seek out places like Thailand that manage to retain their Thainess, unlike the Western democracies. So this has been 5 basic reasons as to why unhappy Westerners would be happier in a place like Thailand. You can interchange Thailand with other developing countries. I'm personally a fan of Peru. I'm also a fan of the Philippines. A lot of these places seem to trade security for freedom. And a lot of us grew up being taught that we live in the freest countries in the world with the most prosperity. And many of us are starting to feel that that's not as much the case these days. So let me know what you think down in the comments below. Do you feel happier outside of your Western home country? What are the reasons for that? I think we could have an interesting discussion, interesting dialogue. Please give us a thumbs up if this content resonated with you. Finally, subscribe to the channel down below if you want to see more content like this, and I will see you soon.